But we're going to kick off today with farmer Pat McKenna. He's a Dexter suckler farmer based in Monaghan. He has his own farm, and also he has cattle out doing what's called regenerative or conservation grazing with no fence collars. And it's a fantastic kind of blend of high technology and restoration, and using animals in a very old way to keep invasive species at bay and reinvigorate lands that aren't farmed actively, so to speak. So first of all, we'll have a look at his video. It's 12 minutes long, and then we'll have a Q&A session with Pat. So please, if you're watching at home, think of questions you might want to throw at him and write them in the column on the right-hand side.
The mountain a little bit now. No tillage in this area or arable. We're on Slieve Bay in Monaghan.
That's right, yeah.
And I'm with Pat McKenna. Pat, you're doing kind of conservation grazing.
Yeah, that's it. You're welcome here, Sean. The conservation grazing, we're using the no-fence technology here to keep these cattle they're in a paddock here of about 60 acres, and they have been for a few months. And the technology is a great product. We can keep them within this area. We can get a good impact on it. The idea is to graze off the Melina grass, which is that sort of yellowy coloured grass that you're seeing there at the minute, and we're hoping to graze it down and create an area like this here where we're standing, which was grazed last year, which is more like pasture. I know it's not tillage, but yeah, it's more like pasture. You're hoping to achieve something where you've got a bit of grass, you've got a bit of clover, you've got more species instead of the Melina grass and rushes which you have over here.
And this is probably also a fire hazard in the summertime.
It is, yeah. I suppose we're grazing here on the southwestern corner of Slieve Bay. We're trying to graze over the next year or two, maybe 100, 150, 200 hectares, where this Melina grass is concentrated. And the idea is, if we graze it down in this area, where people are coming to picnic and to walk and to do whatever, that the burden won't be there, that tinder burden won't be there, which creates a huge fire risk. And I'm delighted to work in cooperation with Monaghan County Council as part of their fire prevention scheme to get this more, get it well grazed down and get the fire risk reduced.
And then, and these of course, we'll get on to the cattle now, these are Dexter cattle, yeah, the red and the black.
That's right.
And completely at home in this area.
Yeah, as I said to you earlier, Sean, one of my fears about putting the cattle up here initially was that they wouldn't thrive up here, that the grass, they wouldn't get the utility out of it. But to be absolutely honest, if you look at these guys here, they're in perfect shape. These guys here are actually fit to go for slaughter at any stage, you know.
And how long have they been here?
These fellas have been here probably 6 or 7 months. They were run up here in April or May, just out of the shed, where they would have been a fair bit thinner than this. I'd sort of be a believer in compensatory growth, where cattle, say after Christmas, you stop feeding them meal, you just feed them silage. They lose a wee bit of weight, and then when you put them out onto grass, they gain that weight within a month or 6 weeks. And these guys, as you can see, they're in great shape. You know, I'm delighted with them. You know. And
for many people, that would probably think that there was no value in this at all, and just
yeah,
to show you.
It is amazing.
It's a very low stocking rate.
I'm actually quite, taken with that. You know. And there's a low stocking rate here, but it adds a string to my bow in that I can sell my beef. I sell the beef locally into Truth Development as part of their Meals on Wheels campaign. And I have another guy, Shawnee McCleary. He runs a street food company called Blasta. I'm supplying him with burgers. I'm also supplying beef boxes, premium beef boxes, to a range of customers. I have 10 or 15 customers that will be taking the beef boxes. And this is a good string to my bow here, in that I have conservation grazed beef, and it adds a bit of a premium to the price that I can get for that product.
And in terms of your costs then, it's probably relatively low. You're not fertilising.
No.
What about animals? Are you treating animals for
No, very little. I'd be running essentially on an organic basis. and I have been for 4 or 5 years. I wouldn't have sown any fertiliser even on my other bits of land in 4 or 5 years. I'd be using clover to push growth. No dosing except in a situation, again, as per the organic scheme where an animal was sick and needed attention. So there'd be very, very little vetting. And I suppose that's one good thing about Dexter's. They seem to be a fairly healthy type of an animal. Up here, you know, like the one thing that I do up here is I use that beta call on for red water for the tick, but touch wood, no issues with it. And I would imagine you could nearly, because they're so resilient, you could nearly get away with no dosing at all and no inputs.
And tell me this then, you're using this note, we can see it slinging from the cow's neck or the animal's neck.
Yes.
So effectively that is, you're just moving them slowly through the
That's right,
through the area, and you can do that from your own house 10 miles away.
Yes, I can sit at home and I can
a relatively lazy farmer.
Yeah. Well, sure, take a look at me. You know, I'm not bragging any threshes. You know, but yeah, the idea is with the no fence that you create a perimeter on your phone. These collars that they have on their necks are acting essentially as a GPS. My perimeter is right at the minute is where this electric fence is, which is I'm using as a sort of a physical barrier just to discourage them from coming out onto this pass here, which is a right of way. So I have to.
It's a kind of a training line.
Yes, it's a training line.
It has no link to the.
No, none whatsoever. Just the fact that the boundary of the no fence system does run along that side of this wee laneway, which, as I said, is a right of way. But I can move the cattle. I can eliminate areas. I can say you feel that an area has been overgrazed. I can put a circle around that using the app, and the cattle won't be able to go into that. The way the system works is the animals come close to this. As these guys come close to this, there's an alarm goes off on the collar, and that gives them a notification that they're getting into a zone where they could get a shock. Now, they got used to it pretty quickly, I'd say. Some of these animals here may never have got a shock, but there would be a lead animal with every group of cattle, and that one possibly has got a jag or two. But as I said to you earlier on, Sean, in the last month, none of them would have stimulated the shocking, you know. And
you were saying to me earlier that it's about 250 odd euro per unit per animal.
Yes.
So in a herd of 40 animals, it's quite an investment.
It's quite an investment.
Could you bring that down to half or a quarter with banking on the lead animals that the rest of the herd will follow?
You possibly could, you know. In an area like this, there's a few hundred hectares up here. In an area like this where you've no other farmers quite close to you, there's no cattle within it.
And you're farming from your sitting room.
Yeah, I'm farming from it. There's no other cattle within a mile or so of these guys. You probably could. There would be a point maybe at different times of the year where there would be cattle, because the collars maybe would have lost signal or the batteries would have run down, where you could use the herd. The pressure of the herd, maybe to have 1 or 2 animals with the collars on them, the GPS on them, and the rest just following that. As I said earlier on, this guy, the red guy here, is the leader of this pack. I would imagine right now, because they're so well used to it, if you had just a collar on him, the rest of them would follow and stay within bounds, you know.
And I know you're not necessarily, you're using more of an extensive grazing system, but there's a lot of discussion now on this idea of holistic management or mob grazing, whatever we want to call it, where you'd move animals through. Do you think the technology could be adjusted to do that?
Absolutely. Funny, No Fence asked me a month ago to demonstrate the system to an Australian guy who was going to use it for that purpose. He has a ranch in Australia. He has a few hundred head of cattle, and his approach is to mob graze, and he was very, very interested and very impressed, and his plan was to use the system to basically move the cattle every day. You know, obviously mob grazing is a situation where you let the grass go up to maybe 6 or 8 inches, and then you put all your cattle onto that, and he was going to just use the GPS to move the perimeter on one side to allow them into the grass, and move the back fence to keep them off the ground that had already been grazed. And he was very impressed with the idea. So there's definitely benefits there, you know, and potential.
Okay, and now this is an actual commonage. This
ground belongs to Antashka.
Okay.
This was the Rossmore estate, which is a famous estate.
So it's more of a bray than actual commonage as such.
Yes. It is sort of it'd be similar to National Trust land in the UK. Antashka are obviously doing that same, working on the same principle. They have several plots of land around Ireland, and I'm happy enough to work with Antashka. Antashka are fairly forward-looking, and conservation grazing is something that they see as being a thing of the future for farming, and I'm more than happy to do that.
And it's great to see environmental organisations embracing the hoof for things like that, rather than having a zero tolerance to livestock.
There's no other way, you know, to break this up. This land here wouldn't have been grazed in maybe 30, 40 years. The previous owner, Paddy Rossmore, lived in London, quite a colourful man and a lovely person, but he didn't take a huge interest in this land for 30 or 40 years. It wasn't grazed, and this huge burden of Molina grass and scrub grows up on it. And it is an SAC, it's a hen harrier protected area, and the CAN project, Antashka, Monaghan County Council and other interest groups here were pretty keen to get it broken down a bit, so that if you look at this here, there's not much life in it. There's not that much wildlife. If you were down on one of my other bits of ground, there will be 5 times as much wildlife knocking about. For the simple reason that when everything gets covered over, there's no chance for the wee voles and maybe skylarks and stuff like that there to nest and to move around. And that inhibits your apex predators then, like the hen harrier. Break it up a bit, get it more like a wee bit more open. Your hen harrier, when he's out hunting, will be able to look down. He'll be able to see his prey on the ground if you break down this huge overburden. And over the next 4 or 5 years, we're hoping to do that, to create more of a habitat. You'll have more hen harriers. It will also be good for grouse, hares, and the sort of animals and birds and things that you would expect to see up here and expect to see more of.
Okay, and the dexters having no impact on that, as in
no,
there's no negative impacts from
no. Well, not as far as I can see. The long and the short of it is the dexters go in here. They are quite light. These guys here are probably about 1/3 of the weight of a typical continental, a Charlie or whatever. You know, that guy there probably on his hoof, he could be 350, 400 kilos. A big Charlie in there would be standing at maybe 700 kilos. He'd be tramping that. These guys are making no impact on it at all. The only impact they're having is they're grazing out that Molina grass, they're breaking it up, but they're not trampling it. They're not doing any damage. You can actually hear this guy here is getting the sound alarm just at the minute, so it just shows that the system is working, and he's not coming any further. So yeah, the dexters are ideal for this. They're also very, very hardy, and their beef is a sort of a fairly premium, a surprise type of product. And the fact that you can use conservation grazing tied in with the dexters, as I said, gives me another string to my bow with my meat sales.
Would have been potentially
exactly. I'm doing a wee bit of public good, I suppose, and it's nice to be able to do that, you know.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks there. That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I love the drone shots. You can really see the terrain you're working in. We have Pat here with us, of course, and we're also joined by John Liston. Now, John is a beef farmer as well from Limerick, and he's involved in a project called Legacy for Life, which is an EU Life project advancing farm to fork, promoting best practice on farms, and also the consumer education organic end as well. So we're going to, Sean, what did you think? I mean, you were out photographing or making a video with the dexters and with that scheme. What comes to mind when you look at it again?
Well, it's the ease of management, you know what I mean? Sometimes I think, you know, I was asked a couple of years ago the role of technology in agriculture, and I was a little bit dismissive of it because often it comes with a huge high cost. And, you know, there's not much point in having that technology if you can't make money by having that technology. So, and I always worry, and sometimes the tech companies try to push this. This one, to a point, I think is slightly different in that if I was just thinking if Paddy Rossmore had the no-fence technology on the app, he could farm it from London. You know what I mean? So, so you know, I think there is opportunities, but also I think if you look at it then and take a step further, one of the big issues farmers have sometimes is land access. you have loads in this case, and you can load at a very low stock rate, and then it comes in the whole area of the rare breed protection, and and you can make money from that, and it's more about the situation rather than the investment. So I think, and I know you're saying that you have concerns over you're a long way away, and that if anything goes wrong in that area, so you're in that kind of doing small bits and we slowly increase. But I just think it has serious potential. And also I think from a holistic management, grazing, and we had the lads from Understanding Ag, Gabe Brown and those over, and they would argue that this method of moving cattle through a system to increase soil health, all this seems to be maybe the technology isn't fully there yet, but it's fairly close, so I think it has serious potential.
And we know there's a few schemes, Pat, using this in Ireland. Yeah. We've two questions there. First of all, the name of the GPS system you're using, it's what again?
No Fence. It's a Norwegian company.
And it's called No Fence?
No Fence, yeah.
Okay, if anyone wants to look it up.
If anyone wants to look it up, or if anyone wants to take a look at the app, I have it on the phone here now. I'll meet anyone after the wee talk here, and you can have a look at the system operating on the app.
Yeah, because you can see on your phone, it explains to people, you can see every animal as a dot. Yes. On a map like Google Maps, and where they are and when they got a shock recently. You can see their repeat offenders.
I just create wee perimeters on the app, and that there is the area that the cattle are confined to. Each animal then comes up as a wee dot, and you can click on the dot. You can track the animal, where it's been for the last day, where it's been for the last week. There's also an application on it where you've got heat spots on it, so you can tell where the animals have been concentrating their grazing, and you can move them around then. So it's a brilliant technology. And just to follow on from what Sean said there, I think that one of the ways this is going to impact in the future is there are thousands of acres of land over in the west of Ireland, commonages and privately owned land that are in SACs and SPAs that are not available to, for argument's sake, the organic scheme. If this technology can be utilised in those areas and accepted possibly by the department, you have thousands of acres available to the organic scheme, and I think that is a future that where Ireland has a responsibility to reach, I think it's 7.5% of its land surface in organics by 2030. That's going to be one way to do it. Now, maybe not in this tranche of the organic scheme, but going forward, this technology can be utilised in that.
And it has a huge biodiversity role, because you're opening up land that won't be taken over by bracken or gorse and become very dominated by just 2 or 3 species, not allowing other plants to come through, and frockens and all the things that we know should be in these mountains and feeding birds. And
as we spoke about earlier, where you're coming from in County Wicklow, bracken is a major problem. Well, Molina grass up on Slieve Bay is a major problem in that it's a tinder. The grass, it is a very nutritious grass for my cattle during the peak grazing season, but over the winter then that grass dies down, or it becomes like straw, what you're looking at here, and it's tinder. So from a biodiversity point of view, if you can get rid of that Molina grass, if you can break down that system, you create a habitat, and that habitat then feeds into the reason for the SPA or the SAC. Up in Slieve Bay, it happens to be the hen harrier, is the apex predator up there. If you open up the ground and if you create more of those voles, the skylarks, the meadow pipits, and the prey species for that apex predator, you're doing a good. As I say, it's a public good.
Absolutely.
I'm also, another thing that I'm aware of is there are good walks up in Slieve Bay. There are a few different walking groups, and people do use that place as a place to go walking. But I think when you go out for a walk, instead of just looking at a sea of Molina grass, it looks a wee bit like Montana or some of those far western states in America. If you were to go up there and you could see hares, you could see the hen harrier, you can see much more wildlife, it would be a much more attractive walk, and it would be a much better amenity.
Absolutely. Second question there, how old are your steers when you castrate them?
I suppose 5-6 months. I'm in the beef data genomic scheme. I'm participating in those schemes, so I castrate the bullocks within the time specified by the department.
And then they go out. You've had your 2 years in this cycle. How long does each animal do out on the mountain, for example, before you finish them?
It depends. At the minute, I'm putting the cattle up to the mountain when they're about a year and a half, that sort of an age. I'm only putting steers up there because they're more easily managed. They'll stay up there maybe 6 to 8 months and they'll fatten up there. And as I said on the video there, when I put the cattle up last year, I thought to myself, now, why am I putting cattle up here? Because there's not much for them, you know. But it's amazing. You look at the cattle in the video there, there are 5 cattle up there at the minute. Any one of them could go straight for slaughter, and they've been up there, say, 6 months. And I suppose the plan going forward is maybe to put the cattle up a wee bit younger, and maybe overwinter up there as well. Because I left, I think it was a half a dozen on it last winter, over the winter. They've done a great thrive. You didn't lose any, you lost nothing.
And it's so low input for you. You're not having to feed them concentrate, you're not having to feed them silage.
It is, and my system is all about low inputs.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not organic, inverted commas, I'm not in the organic scheme. I did look at it 8 or 10 years ago, going into it, but I was put off by the rushes, which I spoke to John about here earlier on. But I am, in principle, organic. I have no inputs, no fertiliser, very, very little meal. Dry bedding for the cattle. I'm a big believer in farmyard manure, and I'm a huge believer in worms and clover. Those are the things that make me a profit ultimately. You know, take care of the soil, let the worms do their work in your soil. Use farmyard manure as opposed to slurry if you can. You'll create a really good soil. If you dig up Sean, you had the spade out in the mountain, if you take a spading out anywhere in my land, you'll find worms.
Yeah, that's great.
They're priceless.
Yeah.
And that's how, I think that's the future. That's where organic is going, and that's where I'm going.
Good. John, how you're in the livestock arena and area, that's what you do at the moment. You were a dairy farmer, of course, and you're in their organic life scheme, or the EU Life projects. Are you excited about these sort of models? I know there's not many people farming like Pat with the no fence collars, but there's more and more every year. There's at least 4 sites with them now.
Well, Tashka are delighted to be involved with Pat in this scheme, and I suppose it's due to the foresight of people like Ian Lumley to be involved in this. And Tashka are involved in a project at the moment. It's an EU Life project which promotes environmental, climate action and conservation actions. And our project is Legacy for Life. It has 3 different strands. One is promoting ponds as a means of biodiversity, improving biodiversity. Second one is, which I'm involved in, is promoting the farm to fork policy, and also there's another strand is green communities. But the farm to fork policy on Tashka are talking to the various stakeholders, and looking at barriers to becoming getting into organic farming. Now, having listened to Jack Nolan there yesterday in his inspirational speech, I think Jack is removing a lot of barriers, which is good to see. So Tashka will use a questionnaire looking at best practice farms, provide some leaflets, books for school kids, look at the Green Schools initiative to promote organic farming, and you could take it, organic farming is environmentally sound, but for farmers to join it has to be economically sound as well. And from visiting our best practice farms, we are seeing that it's every bit as good, if not a lot better, than the equivalent conventional farms from the experiences we have. So it's great to see what Pat is doing there as well.
And what piece do you need to convince more people to go on organic schemes then? Because like when we were talking yesterday, there are still beliefs abroad, I suppose, in the conventional system, even though we don't necessarily want to call it that, but where fellas say, oh no, they don't make money, they don't do this. Is it just a knowledge gap, or there's an attitudinal gap there as well sometimes, isn't there? Yeah, they don't want to shift what they've been doing or what their dad was doing or whatever into something new.
Well, I suppose farmers are conservative. There's myths going there that organic is this, that and the other, that you lose money, you can't control weeds, that you can't dose. And in fairness, a lot of farmers we visited, they've been involved in NOTS projects. They have gone to courses, seminars run by Sean, so the education level is rising. And you get that critical mass of best practice farms. You have the postgrad now in Waterford for organic farming. You'll have a primary degree in Wexford. This all helps. People like Jack Nolan, the department are promoting it, the certification bodies, IFA have a project, an organic project team. So it's been pushed out there, and it's carrot and stick. You have the carrot of, you know, your premia, better prices, and you'll have the stick of environmental issues coming. So organic is beginning to look very, very attractive for a lot of people, even dairy farmers.
Very good. From Ned O'Brien, another question coming in from our online audience. Pat, could you please go through the initial cost and annual payment, and how many cattle are grazing at any one time?
Yeah, the initial cost is per collar. It is reasonably expensive. It's around 260 to buy the collar and the system for the first year. The annual payment is around €40 per year. That's obviously for the use of the GPS and the technology behind it.
Per animal, or once you've
per
bought
collar.
everything? Per
Once
collar.
you've bought the collar,
It's 40 a year.
The collar is costing roughly €260, and then roughly €40 a year for access and to maintain access to the
Onwards,
system.
yeah.
There is an option to lease. I haven't studied it maybe in enough depth, and possibly going forward it may be a more cost efficient way to do it. I think you can lease for around maybe €50 a year, but there's a bit of negotiation around that with the company, because they're sort of teething at this stage. As to how many cattle are grazing at any one time, there's a fairly big area up there. There was an ecological study done there fairly recently, and there's probably maybe 200 or 300 hectares up there that would need to be grazed. Last year,
You have 20 odd, is that
I
it?
have 20 odd up there, I suppose. I could put more up. I have 30 collars. I'm using the collars elsewhere, you know, to monitor cattle as well. But there's nothing to stop me putting maybe 60 or 70 head of cattle up there and doing something similar to maybe mob grazing, you know, moving them around. But at the minute, I'm using 20. It is a sort of a pilot project at the minute, but definitely I'm enthusiastic about getting more cattle up there and making more of an impact on that habitat.
That's great. So like your learnings of the 2 years is not, this is endless trouble, it's not working.
No.
It's nearly all really positive from what I'm hearing, you know.
I'm enthusiastic about it. I'm positive about it. Just as I say, basically from the fact that the cattle do thrive up there, I have a high nature value grazed beef product at the end of it, and I'm getting a lot of support then for that product in my local community. The local Meals on Wheels sponsor, which is a charitable enterprise sponsored by Truth Development, they're taking a lot of the offcuts, the mince and the stewing type meats. I'm doing the beef boxes. I have Shawnee McCleary, the guy from Blasta, who's a pretty famous street food guy down in our part of the world. He's using the burgers, and I'm delighted with that as well. So I'm delighted to be putting a more traditional and a very traceable product out into the market, which has got great taste, which is something that older people, particularly in the Meals on Wheels, anecdotally, the response I'm getting from them is that old people, the taste brings them back maybe 40, 50 years to when beef had that depth of flavour, which maybe supermarket beef and more commercial beef doesn't have. And I suppose another string to that bow is that some of the meat is also going into the schools, and the kids are getting the burgers, and I suppose when they go home to Granny, they're saying, oh, we had Dexter beef today, and maybe Granny had it from the Meals on Wheels, and that taste and that idea of that product being
eaten in your own community.
Eaten in your own
That's
community.
cool.
That turns me on. That enthuses me as well.
Yeah. Sean?
Yeah, I just want to get back to that question number 2 there about how many cattle are grazing at one time. I'm wondering, is that question more around what your capacity has, your system, you know, your app and all? Is there a limited number of how many?
There wouldn't be any limit, no. You could, if you could afford the collars, or if you wanted to put the money out there, you could buy a couple of hundred collars. There are absolutely no limitations. The guy from Australia who came over, he has a cattle station in Australia, and he was interested in mob grazing. His idea was to buy a couple of hundred collars, or at least a couple of hundred collars. So there's no limits that way.
It would be an interesting trial for TAMS, I think. Just
yeah,
out there.
be brilliant.
100%. It is something that going forward now, obviously the criteria have been set for TAMS for this year, but going forward, maybe to bring all that land that's not been used or not been properly utilised over in the west and in the upland areas, if TAMS were able to maybe put their 60% towards those collars, the purchase of those collars, it would make a huge difference going forward.
Okay, we have a question from the floor here. Two, we'll come to you in a minute.
Thanks, Pat. That was very interesting. We have a problem across a lot of the hills and mountains of the west now, where we have massive bracken and fern infestations.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is down to overgrazing from sheep, but also the removal of cattle as well from those hills and mountains.
Yeah.
I just wonder, has bracken been a problem for you in that area at all?
No, on Slieve Bay, fortunately, bracken isn't a major problem. I know there are areas, particularly in Wicklow, as we spoke about earlier, where bracken is a problem. The one thing I would say about the Dexters and the bracken is if you could get those guys in through it, which is essentially what they're doing with the Molina grass up in Slieve Bay, get them to trample it down and get into the middle of it and get at the grass that's underneath it, you possibly could utilise the no fence to make an impact on bracken. Now, I don't have any speciality in bracken because it's not a thing that is. Rhododendron is a bit of a problem up there, but bracken isn't a major problem. But I'd imagine the sort of impact that they're making on the Molina grass and the sort of impact they're making on the areas that we're grazing up there on Slieve Bay, I would imagine they would make an impact in bracken. The only caveat being that bracken possibly is poisonous or that there are issues on that. I'm not knowledgeable enough on bracken.
But even if they break it up, you see, it's very easily broken up, bracken, which is a great thing. Do you know, you might talk to the Wicklow Uplands farmers are doing a no-fence project, and their main adversary is bracken and gorse. So they'd be knowledgeable on that aspect of it. This gentleman here, did you have something to say as well? Just wait one sec. The mic's coming over. Yep.
Yeah, I'm interested in the Dexter breed that you use. You use all Dexter cattle, I presume, is that right?
All Dexter cattle, yeah.
Well, what I'm interested in is the age at slaughter and the carcass weight at slaughter. I'm mentioning that because the organic factories that buy beef cattle, one of the specifications is a carcass weight of 250 kgs minimum. I'm wondering, do the Dexter cattle make that grade?
No. The Dexter on its hoof, the pick of the ones that I would be killing at the minute would be 400 kilos. Roughly killing into maybe a really good one, killing into 220 kilos. Now, I have got some Dexter cattle, particularly during COVID when the restaurants closed, and the fact that Dexter is a high-end, is sort of a premium product. There was a trailblazing lady down in Tipperary, Yvonne Carmody, was pushing a lot of Dexter through Larousse and into high-end restaurants in Dublin. But when COVID came along, the market collapsed. I was able to get some Dexters through ABP, through an agent, but their specification was that they'd be over 200 kilos. And I was able to get some, actually, and they graded pretty well. They went into R4s. Around 210, 220 kilos, but that would be the max. And on your other question about the age of slaughter, the Dexters are a traditional breed, and as opposed to get the best out of them, you have to let them mature. And I'm letting my cattle go to 36 months and over 36 months. I think just to get the level of taste and to get the weight and to get the marbling, you have to get them to that age. I'm killing cattle at the minute that are letting them go into 36 to 40 months. My butcher has a license to slaughter up to 72 months, so I'm a fan of letting them mature. Now, that doesn't fit in with a lot of commercial situations where ABP, for argument's sake, and the processors are looking for cattle to be under 30 months. But they have relented on that, and because obviously of the war in Ukraine and the demand for beef at the minute, ABP are letting you kill cattle up to 36 months. And they are weighing heavier. Even commercial cattle will weigh much more at 36 months than they will at 30 months. And the cost of feeding them, and if you push that back against the price of beef at the minute, it makes sense to let them go to 36 months. ABP will accept cattle even over 36 months if they're scarce enough, so you have options there.
And the reason I'm asking this is I bought a few Dexter weanlings this year for the first time, and I think that the factory possibly won't take them, but is there an outlet with a butcher for them?
Yeah, I suppose I had that problem. I was lucky in that for the first maybe 10 or 15 years when I was at Dexter's, Yvonne Carmody was out there and she was killing 10 Dexters a week doing phenomenal work. But when COVID came along, I had to sort of do my own thing, and that entailed sourcing my local markets. And I have a local butcher. Very fortunate in Monaghan in that we have a local licensed butcher, Connerty Meats, who are great butchers and will pretty much deliver my product to me vacuum packed, which is how I want it to go to the market. All I have to do then is label it. There is a market. ABP and Nina are doing a kill. They're killing twice a month, and there is the option of getting into that market. The spec is reasonably high. They're looking for cattle up to sort of 200 kilos and around an R4 or an 04 on grade. But if you join the Dexter Society, you will gain, and our board be assured, you will gain access to that market. But listen, the best way to go about it is to go local. I think if you have a butcher locally, go local, create your own product. Liam Gavin actually is a shining example here in Carrick and Shannon. He has an outlet just over in the retail park there. Honestly, he's doing something inspirational there. Do it yourself. The people will be there will be people there locally who will take your product. Where I am in North Monaghan, in my hinterland, is about maybe a population of 30,000 people. You need a very small percentage of that 30,000 people to create a market. If you only have 1% of that 30,000 people, that's 300 people. That's more than enough people to take an animal a week off you. So there are ways of building it up. It is a bit time consuming, and there is a marketing element to doing that, but the people are there. It's like a wee bit like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come.
You just making the connections.
All you've got to do is have it. There will be an organic market, there will be a farmer's market, there will be a guy like Shawnee McCleary from Blasta who will come to you and say, oh, I want that product. That's you can go about it in that route. I think it's a great way to get into the market.
The other thing is, if you're worried about weight and getting them up to weight, I know the two projects in Wicklow are using Galloways, black Galloways, not the Belties. But sorry, in the Luggalo project they're using Belties. And I saw them come in from the UK. They were held on my neighbour's farm before they went up to Luggalo, and they're bloody massive. Yeah. You know, now the smaller black Belties down in the Lugnaquilla project are smaller. But they're obviously a suitable animal as well. So maybe even the shorthorns, you know, there's probably maybe in more lower land areas, but there's probably a choice of animal that depending on where you are.
You're narrowed down to traditional rare breeds, which is the Miley, the Dexter, and the Kerry, and the Driven.
Oh, with this, are you? You can't use.
No, but you get the benefit then through acres of the payments for those.
So you get a traditional breed payment.
But there is also other traditional. And look, we can move it along. You can look at the Belties either, or the normal black Galloways, and then you could look at the Angus or the Hereford.
Yeah, the Angus.
All those animals have potential here. I think in the extreme situations, and I'm not necessarily saying yours is very extreme, but for that really rough grazing, I'd be sticking to
the lighter Dexters.
Or the Galloways or the Mileys. The Mileys
the Galloways would work pretty well in that environment because they're very hardy. But I suppose one of the things about the Dexters is the lightweight on foot means that you're not poaching, that you're not that heathland and that blanket bog, that you're making enough of an impact to make it a better habitat, but you're not you're not tramping it, you're not poaching it, you're not
because it's such soft ground.
The ground is soft.
Okay. Listen, Pat, thanks a million for talking to us, and John. We're trying to catch up, so we're going to move straight into Richard Fortune's VT. He is a full-time organic farmer in beef down in Wexford Town, in Castlebridge, near Wexford Town. And we're going to watch his VT, and then we're going to have questions with him after.
Can I just make one point before we finish up, Suzanne?
Yeah.
I made this point to Jack Nolan yesterday about agroforestry, and we were talking about rushes. I think that agroforestry in combination with organics is a great way forward. I have 70 acres of marginal land in the sort of Slieve Bay foothills, which is a land that I fear would become saturated with rushes over a couple of years. I think and I know that Jim McAdam is going to speak about this after a while, I think agroforestry combined with organics could be a great way to mitigate rushes.
Yeah, because the trees suck up the moisture, don't they? And then you
the trees soak up the moisture, they create shelter, they create a phenomenal habitat.
Yeah.
I'm a Farming for Nature ambassador, and I'm really into the wildlife, obviously, as you know from what I've said. The agroforestry creates a phenomenal habitat.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that more later, but I know, and I think it'll be a lot more practiced if we took this conversation in 5 years or 10 years. We will be talking, about it in so many examples. We just need to push it forward and get there.